All right. Welcome to another edition of the O Bro Show. I am your host, Josh, and I'm joined
and Seth
by Seth, who is also your host. And we are the O Bros. We're excited tonight. We're going to do another conversation with a guy that I met through the internet. Well, really, this is the first time meeting formally, but yeah, kind of everybody. Yeah,
everybody we've had on.
Seeing their content, seeing what they put out, seeing their ministry as well is a cool aspect. And then the more I see their stuff on X, and I'm like, this is really good. Like I start liking more of their posts. I'm like, this is someone I want to talk to. So that's some of the
this is just the excuse. That's all this is. It's just our excuse to talk to people.
Exactly. It's perfect. That's our production team right there. It's just Josh wanting to talk to somebody he sees on YouTube or X, and he's like, let's invite them to the show. But we're excited to be joined by Colton Yarbrough, who is a pastor. He is also a YouTuber and content creator, and I'm sure other things that we'll get into as well. I first saw him through some of his Bible reviews, and then got to learn more about his theology and stuff, and just excited to talk to him really about pastoring a church and what that looks like. We've done some of the high level theological ivory tower talk, which is still all very important. We don't want to get away from that, but I do want to make this really applicable and talk about this, about what does it look like on a local level, especially at a smaller church, to pastor people. So excited to talk to you about that. I'm going to bring him up. Only other preliminary note is that, hey, we are trying to get to 250 subscribers.
We can do it
by the end of the year,
I believe.
Hey, throwing it out there. So Obro Show is trying to get to 250 subscribers by the end of the year. So if you want to help us out, just consider subscribing. It is free.
It's $3.99.
Yeah, Seth, you're going to shave your mustache if we get there. I'm just kidding. I just threw that out there.
If we want to put something on it, I could see if I could do a buzz cut.
Okay, I don't know if
the wife would like it, but
okay. Well, stretch goal 500 subs. Seth gets a buzz cut.
Yeah, if we can push it, yeah.
What's up, layman apologist? Good to have you here and joining the podcast. Hopefully, it's interesting and helpful. So let's bring up Colton to the stage. Welcome to the show, Colton Yarbrough.
Hey, what's up, guys?
Welcome. We're super excited to have you and talk about what you do, your occupation, your ministry, and your calling and all the like. So kind of just wanted to start there, which is how did you get into pastoral ministry?
Yeah, right on, man. Well, pardon me. First off, let me just say, if you catch me looking this way, it's because it's where my monitor is, where I can see you guys.
Okay,
so I'll try and look at the camera when I'm talking, but I got into pastoral ministry, and I've said this before to people who've asked, honestly, way too soon. I was one of those youth ministers who maybe shouldn't have been, but I started there, and that's all I've been doing ever since as a main occupation. So I started as a youth minister, but before that, obviously felt called to ministry, wanted to do this. And it was an ironic thing because my grandfather's a pastor, my dad's a pastor. Growing up, I was like, I'm definitely going to do something else. And that didn't happen. So, I got into it as I think I was 21 years old when I started in youth ministry and was ordained in my church. And then kind of from there, just took on a few different roles in pastoral ministry. Did the worship leader guy thing for a little bit too.
Yeah.
But always have been ever since then preaching and teaching as well. So did the youth ministry thing for 4 or 5 years, shifted into more of a preaching and teaching to the congregation after that, and been there ever since. So
and I mean, I think I know, but have you always been in the same theological tradition? Is that what you started your ministry in and where you're pastoring now?
Kind of. not really. I've always it depends on what you mean by theological tradition, I guess. I've always been Baptist. I grew up in a Baptist church, Southern Baptist church, and my grandfather and my dad, kind of what I would consider more of the what you would get from just a basic SBC church. And I don't mean that in a disparaging way at all. I just still had the dispensationalism kind of in there. And they wouldn't be where I'm at today as far as that, or the more confessional side of things. So, you know, I hold to the Second London Confession and love it. So there was a shift from that thing to the other in a sense. But there's a rootedness, I think, in the Baptist tradition for sure. So
It's good. Anything with, so how did you get started with content creation then?
Oh yeah, that just had some Bibles that I thought were cool and liked watching Bible reviews, and just thought, hey, I'll give this a shot. And I was just doing it for fun, and quickly ran out of Bibles to review because I'm not made of money, and had to kind of expand that a little bit. So I started taking on different topics as well. So some theological discussion, some just book reviews and things like that of books I've been reading, and honestly never expected it to go anywhere. Not that it's, you know, I look at my YouTube channel now and I think I'm at like 3,500 subs or something like that. And that's still a very small channel by comparison to what's out there. But to me, I'm like, I never saw it getting to that. It just kind of blew up. And I say blew up, like small blew up. And I didn't expect it. So yeah, it's been fun. Been enjoying it.
The layman apologist also said you have a Kiwi cult.
I do.
Which I've seen.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yes. Yeah. I am. I started a trend fairly recently, and I say that I think there's like 4 or 5 people who.
So the background for my brother, who's a little bit less initiated, is that a lot of people on X, they have their X profile, and then they have these like emojis that tell you what their theological opinions are. So I think I was on your stream when you talked about this, Colton, but I think the grapes are like the hypothetical universalists camp.
I think it's even a little more specific than that. I think the grapes are supposed to be Baxterian. So not just the HU stuff, which that's a part of it for sure, but it's a way of just saying like we like Baxter. We like Baxter a lot. Yeah.
Okay.
So and that stream started just as me going, what is this? Like why is there fruit and crowns and badgers? Like what is happening? And just kind of took it from there. So
Twitter's weird.
Twitter's weird. Yeah,
it is weird.
Place.
It's a weird place, but it's a fun place though.
Yeah,
you see the trends.
Yeah.
Getting into your background a little bit, what was your experience like? Maybe dig into. We can get on the pastoral side with pastoring the youth. What did that look like for you? What is? I don't want to say any hot takes, but do you have any like? What did you learn from that, your time in youth ministry, being a youth pastor, and anything that has helped prepare you for where you're at today, leading a church?
Yeah, for sure. Youth ministry is a wild thing in and of itself. I would say even the shift that's happened in me about youth ministry, I don't even like the title youth pastor anymore. You know, I think the biblical qualifications for elder go across the board. This man is either an elder or he's not. He's not like elder light, you know. You can say maybe elder candidate is a fine deal. This is a guy that we're watching that we think is, you know, gifted, the Lord has called, and go from there. But I definitely learned some things. I mean, I took an approach to youth ministry to where it's like, I'm not gonna just be like the goofy guy, you know, just doing stupid games that no one actually likes. I wanted to actually preach the Bible to these kids, and I did. And you know, we did at our church, we did the thing where we bust in a bunch of kids that they weren't there on Sunday mornings, and that comes with its own challenges. But even, man, to this day, I ran into one of my kids who's now a grown woman. not that long ago, still walking with the Lord, was one of those bus ministry kids that did not come on Sundays. And there's multiple stories like this, but where that it mattered to her. And to me, that was just a blessing. Like, I'm thankful that the Lord used that, as messed up as I may have been trying to figure things out and all that. I think it still mattered. So it taught me, I think with youth in particular, it taught me how to start walking with people, even though they're kids, they're teenagers, it's like, it taught me how to shepherd, like how to be there for them when they had questions and how to pray for them when they had issues going on in their life. And, youth ministry will teach you that, and it's something you'll learn later in pastoral ministry, what might not sound like a big deal to you is something that is a life-altering thing for someone else. And, to have that sort of pastoral care to bring God's word to it, youth ministry really helped equip me for that. Honestly, it really did.
Yeah. That's awesome. What about the unique dynamics of like working and pastoring youth, but also have that, like you said, that dynamic that they're coming from other households, you're having to deal with parents. That's just such a unique, it's almost like, I feel like uncharted waters in terms of like, how does scripture guide this? You're talking about parents that might not be under, that local church's authority or ministry, and you still have to functionally pastor their kids. How did you work through that?
Yeah, man, that's a hard thing, especially when you have some of them who are there who are, coming on Sunday morning. They're a part of the church. They've been baptized, all these things, versus the kids that have not. That's why I think it's really messy and hard. But even now, the church I'm at now, on Wednesday evenings, we do what we call it Family Worship Wednesday, because we still have not necessarily, we're not bussing them in, but kids just come, and they don't come on Sunday mornings, but they just come. But it's not a youth ministry per se. It's like we're trying to incorporate everyone into this thing. And I just basically do family worship like I would do at my house with these kiddos and other families who come, so
that's really awesome.
It's just kind of taught me that whoever walks through those doors, you can debate the program side of it, which we're not doing. We're not programming youth and only youth here, and we have Sunday school classes, but that's about it. So I just don't view it through that lens anymore. I just kind of look at it through the lens of whoever's walking through that door. We're worshiping, we're gathering, we're worshiping, and I view it through the lens of really evangelistic things. We're these kids that are coming who don't have that reinforcement at home. They need the gospel desperately. Like, they need the gospel clearly and desperately. And I get them for this limited time, and I just want to give them the truth of the gospel as often as I can. So I kind of look at it as a sort of evangelistic thing where, we're not marketing it. I hate that term. We're not promoting it as such. It's just worship. But it's where I get a lot of kids who they're not going to have that reinforcement at home, and they're coming regardless. So, And
it sounds like maybe you can get into, unless you have a question.
Well, my question was more so, it was actually related to what you first said about how you're more confessional now, specifically with the Second London Confessional. Was there, what made you go from your initial background of more of like SBC, which some SBC churches are confessional, some aren't as much. What caused you to become more confessional in your Baptistic theology?
This is going to sound kind of odd, given that there's a big argument even on X about like biblicism versus confessionalism. But honestly, reading the Bible, just reading the Bible on my own I'll never forget the first time I read scripture all the way through, and I realized I have so many questions. Like I need to be able to understand this in a, at least have a grasp on what these things mean. And that, there's other teachers that pushed in other directions. For me, the big gateway drug for a lot of people in my generation towards a more reformed soteriology was John Piper. So he was big for a lot of people, but hearing some of the things he said made me think and ask a lot of questions. And well, the big sort of thing that fell for me, honestly, like more than the doctrines of grace, because even in our little church, we had guys who held to the doctrines of grace.
Right.
But the big shift was when I realized I'm not in the dispensational camp. And then it was like, okay, because I remember just kind of researching that and seeing like, okay, this theology really didn't come into play until far, far later on. And so it just caused me to look into roots, Baptist roots, because I felt firm in my Baptist convictions, but it was like, I want more substance, I want something that feels like solid ground. So that led me to find one of my favorite podcasts that has ever existed, Doctrine and Devotion, with my friend Joe Thorne. And I don't know if you guys do you even know who that is?
I think I've heard of it.
Yeah. Joe and Jimmy have been out of the podcast game for a bit, but Joe, is
that who Bob the Baptist referenced?
Yeah, I think that's who Bob
the Baptist.
Yeah, they're from like they're the guys who they drive around, get cigars, and kind of
pastors in cars, smoking cigars. Yeah, there's Joe and Jimmy.
Yeah, I know exactly who you're talking about.
So they did Doctrine and Devotion. They did a podcast, and in that podcast they walked through the Second London and just talked about it. And they were the most chill guys. Like I felt so at home because they're not. Joe and Jimmy were relatable. They weren't like this overly studious. They were able to put the cookies on the bottom shelf for me, is a way to say it.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
But that really that helped me unpack. Okay, we have these historic roots. We have this historic confession, and I started getting into it, man. And I just weighing that against Scripture, and it's like, I think I'm on board. Like this is where I'm at. So that's how I landed there.
That's so interesting because like I share like that trajectory is like very similar to my own. Like started in that SBC kind of broadly evangelical churches, and but recently a couple of years ago it was dispensationalism that fell. Did that research of it, and then that is like the whole pipeline into Reformed theology, and then also having the learning about the Baptistic roots of that particular Baptist and that tradition. And so, I feel like I'm following you, Colton, just like I'm somewhere on the journey following in your footsteps a little bit. So I relate a lot to that. I'm trying to see where he's at. I don't know.
I had a master's seminary youth pastor who kind of just threw me in the deep end in youth group. So
I get it, man.
So it's fun. My question was, it was related to that. I'm trying to think of where I was at. It's gone. So if you have another one, it's gone.
You said you were solid in your Baptistic, I guess like doctrines or theology. What are those Baptistic doctrines that you're thinking about when you say that versus like dispensationalism? Because I guess dispensationalism is so tied to a lot of Baptists.
Unfortunately,
churches. Unfortunately, even though it shouldn't be. It just now, even though historically it wasn't, it's modernly known as a very Baptist thing. It's just accepted of just like even at the school I teach at in the library, there's something that kind of annoyed me. I looked in the library and on like one of the bookshelves, they have like the entire Left Behind series. The entire Left Behind series. Yeah. And I was just, I don't know. It's just common now in like American Christianity, or I guess like Baptist-esque Christendom.
Yeah. No, it is. And I think when I say Baptist, what I hold on to is as far as the Baptist understanding of the ordinance or the means of grace of baptism, being for believers, professing believers. And I held on to that because I just, and here's the thing, there was, I shared this with someone else, but there was at one point the closest I'd ever been to considering a Paedo-Baptist view, is in relation to the fact that my son, one of my children, is on the autism spectrum, and he's not super communicative. Like he's more repeats things than anything. And I just remember like feeling the weight of like, what if I never get to baptize my son as a Baptist? And that is just a heavy weight of that. And I thank God for other pastors in my life. So at the time when I was that was hitting me, I was doing a residency at a church in Mansfield, and they hold to the New Hampshire Confession. So I don't know if you're super familiar with that, but it's kind of really well known in like the 9 Marks kind of churches. So it's doctrines of grace are there. It's more covenantal in its understanding. It's just smaller. And my pastor that I was working under, he was like, because I was just sharing my concerns, and he was like, brother, if your son confesses even in the slightest of ways, we have an understanding for providential hindrances and these kinds of things. And like, there's nothing to prevent us from baptizing him. And, and that stuck with me. And it's been like, I don't change my convictions about what I think Scripture clearly teaches just because it's convenient for me. And that's not a slight at all towards my Paedo-Baptist brothers. I love them. But just a personal conviction. It's like, okay, why do I hold to this? Is it because I just grew up with it, or is it because I think it's clearly biblical? And I just have held fast, man. I just think it's so biblical. So I hold fast to it.
And how is that tradition? I mean, I don't know. How was that transition? I don't know where that took place in your pastoral ministry, but how has that been between some of the people that you've been in ministry with, or just other Baptists that knew you? Has that been a challenge? I'll speak for myself a little bit. As I've developed in that way, it's almost like in some matters, especially with eschatology, when we're talking about that, it's almost like I'm talking a different language to some people that are Baptistic as well. So that's been a challenge, because I'm like, how do I even bridge this gap? So I don't know if you felt that challenge in your pastoral ministry, and maybe share a little bit about how your not even change, but development into that, how that impacted that.
So into like a confessionalism, is that what you're?
Yeah, confessionalism, and even if you want to make it specific about dispensationalism, because I know that even people get really passionate about that area specifically.
They do, man. My biggest thing with that is I learned you cannot be, and this is just the truth, you cannot be a non-dispensational ninja trying to sneak into a very dispensational Baptist church and then change it from the inside. You have to be upfront, and you have to say, this is where I'm at. This is the direction I'm going to lead, and I'm not going to go this route. And even the church where I'm at now, luckily, the search committee, because they had that, had great people on it. And luckily, this church already has a lot. Like, there's things that we're working on for sure, but very close to me theologically already. Yeah. So it was just being upfront and saying, because they did ask about my eschatology, and they asked about the dispensational versus covenantal. And for one, I think that's a big factor. Churches need to know what's important to them. And to be upfront about how important that is to them. And so they asked the question, and I laid it out on the. I'm like, I'm more in the 1689 Federalist camp. Like the way I view covenant and these things. And you just got to be honest about that stuff, because if you try and just sneak in, where it's just really not wanted, you're going to have problems. I went through that before I ended up here. I was in the process with a church in Montana, and made it a long way through the process. And there was one other guy, and they ended up going with the other guy. And then they called me back 2 weeks later, and they're like, it's not going to work out with him because we found out that he's opposed to dispensationalism. I was like, well, it's not going to work out with me either, brother. Like,
yeah.
And I had to tell, I'm like, that's the kind of stuff you need to have up front in your search, so that you're not getting something you're not looking for.
Right.
So, yeah.
And that brought an interesting thought of mine, and I want to pick your brain on this too. So in pastoral ministry, in these areas of doctrine where we can still recognize, it's not something like, they're not saved or something, or they can't, it's heresy or something. Yeah. How do you as a pastor balance shepherding your flock? Like you talked about, you don't want to infiltrate or kind of like domineer the church into a position that's more in alignment with yours. How do you balance that shepherding, like meeting the needs of your congregation doctrinally, while also not compromising what you think is truly biblical? Like where's the line there, and do you recognize that in some issues?
Yeah, it's good. I think that piece, I mean, the pulpit is going to be a huge part of that. I mean, your preaching ministry, pastors have to preach doctrines. We have to do doctrinal preaching. And, I believe in biblical exposition. We've been going through the Gospel of John, and whenever we come to something that in the text has doctrinal significance, you really got to press into that. So whenever we began John, the first chapter, we're pressing hard into Trinitarian theology. Like we're pressing hard into what we mean when we say Jesus is God. And, we're going to do that from the pulpit. And then you can, at least in my experience, there's questions and follow-up stuff all the time that happens, and you have to be willing to shepherd people through that and walk with them with an open Bible and just say, here's where I'm getting this, if they have more questions. But the pulpit is important for preaching doctrine. It's part of it. So certainly use it. But then, a very basic practical level, have people over for dinner. Talk to them, spend time fellowshipping with them, bring up the stuff and ask what they think and see where they're at and check in on them and do the hard work of shepherding, to ask those kind of questions.
As a pastor, does it feel, or I guess maybe this was a struggle when you first started ministry, what's it like having, I guess part of your job being that, like, fellowship? Like, how do you find that line of like, this is work, and so like being professional and holding yourself to a certain standard, but also being like genuine with your flock?
I think I can only speak for me and my approach, and I think my desire has always been to be this, part of this just comes down to integrity, be the same person all the time. Now that doesn't mean, there's levels and layers to that, where you have to, maybe you're a little more filtered, but you're not being someone different. I'm just a believer in honesty about who you are as a person. Don't try and pretend to be someone far more pious than you are, at the same time, don't fall into this idea of, the other end of the spectrum of just being so casual that no one even sees you as a pastor or authoritative, as far as where God has placed you. So my thing is just to try and be consistent. And there's a reason why, and this is just maybe because this has been on my mind lately, but I think it starts in the home. It's in my mind all the time. I don't ever want my kids to look at me at church and the way I'm interacting with people or preaching from the pulpit and go, yeah, he's full of it. I want them to be able to look at me no matter where I'm at and go, my dad's the same. I mean, he's the same dude. He might talk in different tones at times and things like that, but he's not trying to pretend. And I think that's so vitally important. So, authenticity is a real thing. We need it. We've got to do it. And I think the more authentic you are, the better. And that's not to say there isn't an air of, I don't like the term professionalism, but there's a time where you certainly have to be more guarded and in that, but I don't think that that's necessarily, you're not the same person. You're putting on a front. I think that's dangerous.
I might be shifting gears a little bit, but it's because I remember my question from earlier.
That's okay.
You talked to, you've been in ministry, your whole career. That's how you developed. I don't know about your theological training in terms of like your education, but do you want to speak into how God has used really hands-on ministry experience as you've been growing and learning, as opposed to, maybe someone who starts out just in the theological training and then they go into it. You talked about, I think you talked about some of the challenges or even how that was maybe not something you would do in hindsight, but would love to learn kind of how the hands-on approach and learning through your ministry has helped or maybe harmed you.
Yeah, no, for sure. So let me frame this really quick just before I talk about it. I think this might be controversial to some people, but I genuinely believe that the primary education for pastors should be in the local church. The primary. And I say that as a guy who is, I have my undergrad is in biblical theology. I'm still slowly pursuing an MDiv. I'm like 70-something% through. I've already taken Hebrew and almost died. I've done all my Hebrew requirements already. So like, I value institutional education. I'm not saying that at all. I think it's extremely valuable. It pushes you, it challenges you. It's good, and you should, I think you should do it. But if you go to your Bible and you look at the qualifications for a pastor, that is the standard, right? That's what you're supposed to be looking to as whether or not you are qualified. And again, I'm not knocking institutional education, but nowhere in those passages does it say you have to have a Master of Divinity. It's just not in there. Do I think it's wise to pursue it? Yes. Yeah. And I think that's good. But I do think there is an element of just, we have to look at the church as kind of our primary proving ground, because you'll find you hear this from a lot of guys, they get out of seminary and they get thrust into a role, and there's a lot of things that they did not expect and so the benefit to letting your local church be sort of what stewards you along the way is that you learn from the other guys, the other pastors who are already doing it. And I can say that helped me tremendously, even though my theology has shifted some, since when I started. Being able to observe other pastors and walk with them and go with them to hospital visits and go with them to, all the various things they do, sit in the elder meetings. These kinds of things are so valuable. And it shows you what to do. And then some cases it does show you what not to do. Sometimes you can look at a situation and you just kind of go, I don't think that played out right. And, you learn. And then when you mess up, you learn, through that process of I look back on some things that I did, or, they're not disqualifying things, but things that I did that I'm like, I would have done it way differently now. So I do think there is that sort of don't take for granted the fact that God has given us the church as the primary way that we raise up leaders. And I can only speak from my perspective, but if there were a young man in my church who came to me and said, I think I'm called to pastoral ministry. Can I do some things with you? Can you show me some stuff? Can I go with you next time you have to go to the hospital? Can I sit in and you talk to me about your sermon prep? That I would be overjoyed. I'd be like, yes, let's do it. And so I think the church itself just needs to, and again, I want to be clear here. A church has to be healthy in order for that to happen, right? And I think that's where we see the problems and the disconnect is when you have a church that's not healthy, and you're going to have trouble learning. But if the church is doing what it's supposed to be doing, and it's relatively healthy, you can learn so much. And I even look back at my time of my pastoral residency. Man, I learned so much from just walking with those brothers, sitting in an elder. I'll share one story where the Lord just smacked me in the face with my inadequacies. And I'd been doing pastoral ministry for a while, but I did this residency. I go to my first elder meeting, and the guys spend like 20 minutes, just talking through different things, the life of the church, what's coming up and their plans and stuff. And then the remainder of the time, they pull out their directories and they say, all right, it's time to pray. And they prayed for each individual member of the church and their families. And they went around the room and they asked me to join in, even though I'd been there for a little bit. So they assigned me a couple of families to pray. And man, I was just broken. I was weeping. I was just like, this is what pastoral ministry is. It's not, it's shepherding. It's praying for souls under your care. And I had dropped the ball huge in that way. And so that kind of stuff, you learn. In my experience, I never learned to do that in seminary. I just didn't. Of course they talk about shepherding and things like that, but to see it modeled and to see these men who care for their people, it's so impactful. And it makes me think about something my dad said one time. I had him on my channel and I asked him what was his biggest, the main piece of advice he would give young men who are seeking to get into pastoral ministry. And he says on my channel, you have to love people or this isn't for you. And I know that's so simple, but it's so true. Man, if you want to get into pastoral ministry to be a theologian and be thought of as smart and to be able to preach, which are all good things, I'm not knocking those, but you don't, as Corinthians says, but you don't have love, you're a glanging symbol. It's just not effective. You have to love people. And so box over. That's just, I think the local church we need to do better at the local church level of equipping men for ministry.
Yeah. I've read about this in other books or whatever. And it's kind of like the identifying and developing the character qualities of a young man versus the competency. I think in seminary and in churches, like you're talking about, sometimes we really emphasize this guy is competent, like he's got all of the abilities, and we forsake the character qualities that we want to. And even and maybe you can speak into this, Colton, too, even with like some search committees too, it's like, what kind of questions are we asking here? To actually know that this is the person that's going to be leading this church. what do we want to be asking them is certainly important, and it's probably underemphasized in a lot of churches as well. So
oh, for sure. Yeah, if you have a guy who's super confident and competent, and he's able to preach well, to teach well, and all those things, but he is a jerk to his wife and kids, that man he's unqualified. And there's too many guys that get pushed through because they have these other things. They're focusing in on one aspect of the qualifications. They're able to teach, and they haven't had an affair yet. So that's cool. We'll just push them through. Yeah. And that's how you end up with tragedy, man. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I think, and this is a practice I've tried to instill in myself, if you're thinking of going to pastoral ministry or you're already in pastoral ministry, it doesn't matter. The pastoral epistles should be where you live on the daily. Like, you've got to keep diving into those, because that's where that's our seminary book, so to speak, right? We have Timothy and Titus, the both Timothy books and the Titus book, where Paul is giving instruction to pastors. And it's the inspired word of God, right?
Right.
There's nothing that's going to top that as far as effectiveness. So I'm a big proponent of pressing into those things, and a search committee certainly needs to press into those things too when they're looking for a guy.
Joel Webbin's going to call us woke. No, I do have a question though. I got him with that one.
You just threw it out there. It's like we're just having a nice even keel conversation. Seth goes immediately to the spice. I love it.
I love
There's
it.
your clip.
There's a clip.
No, do you? I guess from my perspective as a young man, at least looking at media, it seems as though in younger Christendom right now, we're kind of seeing a pendulum swing back to more of the intellectual side of things. We're kind of done with this like hyper charismatic kind of like just hearts on fire for the Lord and like just figure it out, where we're swinging back to more traditional confessional roots. Do you think that we're almost over intellectualizing like being a pastor, kind of like what you're talking about, where we're holding up this competency over just the character because of that pendulum swinging back?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty classic case of overcorrection that happens both ways, right? I mean, it's the nature of the beast, because there's one level to where it's like competency is important, and I'm not trying to downplay that at all. I want to be always learning, and I'm thankful for. Let me frame it like this: with the younger generation coming up right now who are pressing into those kinds of things, I'm thankful that they're doing so. I do think that it can be dangerous and lead to sort of a dead orthodoxy. I mean, because you know how it is, man. Like you see some of the younger guys, then they're good. Like they want to know the truth. And I think that's so good. Like, I think that's so good. And a lot of the arguments, I'm still going to call it Twitter. I can't even call it X. I try. Right. But a lot of the arguments and the back and forth and the things, I think, it's good to see young men who care. Like, they're not just going to accept slop when it comes to doctrine. I think that's good and it's needed. But if you're pressing into the competency and the intellectual side of things, and you're in doing so, your heart is becoming hard against others that you might deem beneath you, that's a major red flag and a problem. And if you just look at the epistle of 1 John, he's got a lot to say about people who don't love their brothers. And it's important to have those competency things, but man, I agree. I think the pendulum swinging so far, it can result in an orthodoxy that is loveless and dead. That's a problem. And I'm not, I don't see a ton of that. But it does happen in the same way that if you go the other way and it's all just feelings and woo, and, that's just as problematic. We have to balance that out. And I think Scripture does that for us. It wants to equip us with sound doctrine, and it also wants it to be something that moves from the head to the heart and has a practical outworking, not just intellectual. Man, I can go, ratio the people online or whatever. So,
yeah, with my 10 different X emojis in my profile name,
my anime profile.
Yeah,
right. That's right.
No, I mean it's a lot of I always think to the Apostle Paul, likening his time in Judaism. You say he was zealous.
Yes,
and it's not in some sense like you want that. Like he's not necessarily saying like all of that is bad. It's just thinking about when he comes to Christ, his zealousness is directed in the right direction.
Yeah.
He was zealous in his former ways, but under Christ, there's submission there, and the chief being that of love.
Yes.
No one writes on that, potentially even better than Paul. So there's a lot to learn there. And I've checked myself on that too, especially as a young man, being online, being in this space. It's like, it is so easy to get in these back and forths. And so, in some regards, you've seen me, Colton. Sometimes in some regards, you want to argue about like Baptist stuff as well, because the charge is that we don't have any tradition, or we don't care, or like we have a low view of the sacraments. So like we're not gonna. It's like no. It's like I want to feel frustrated about our tradition in a sense that's healthy.
Yeah.
But that can so easily be weaponized, so easily to hating our brothers. So yeah, it's a tough balance.
It is, man, and it's not just to speak into you. It's not just a young man thing. Older men have to check their hearts. We all have to, in that kind of stuff, because with you, I share that zeal, right? I share that zeal for Baptist roots are not they're not the thing that they're often made out to be by people online. And there is substance, and it's good, and it's rich. And I don't want to defend those things in a sense that I'm bludgeoning other people, saying, well, you're dumb. But I do want to say, hey, we're not dumb. Like, we have good reasons why we have these convictions, and we have historic roots in those reasons. And it's okay to talk about those things and to share them and be like, look, I'm just so tired of the nonsense of, you guys aren't allowed to talk because you're not truly reformed or whatever. It's like, no, I think it's good to stand up and speak about that. Like, we need to. And when we do that, we're not trying to say that we think you guys are dumb or that you don't have good reasons for why you hold your convictions. We differ, and it's a genuine difference that I think can be had in brotherly affection, to where it's like, we don't agree, but we agree on a lot. And man, I've been reading Matthew Bingham's Orthodox Radicals, where it's talking about the history of the early Baptists. And it's so fascinating, because one of the things he talks about is something that I think many of us hope for with our Paedo-Baptist brothers, and that these early Baptists, the Congregationals, the more, I guess you would say, like the Savoy Declaration guys, they had fellowship with these early Baptists that were Calvinistic. And these early Baptists actually distanced themselves from the general Baptists. And they were like, just because we agree on baptism, we have far more in common actually with these brothers than we do
Right.
with you. And I think many of us are just trying to say that, like, hey, we want to be friends with our Paedo Baptist brothers
Yeah.
that we agree with a lot of things on. And we have differences in understanding of covenant theology, but there's a lot to be had where we can fellowship, we can be friends, and we can, you know, talk about these things without insulting one another. You know, so yeah.
No, I think it's always interesting too to see where the fights, and we're getting a little bit off the pedestal, but I'm gonna keep going.
Right.
It's interesting where the Christian ire is directed. So like, and I think Keith Foskey gets it right, because Presbyterians get mad at Baptists, but like that's because they want Lutherans to be their friends. But the Lutherans are like, your covenant theology is completely wrong, Presbyterians. So like, but the Lutherans want Catholics to be their friends. So like, it's like, it just keeps going.
Yeah.
They're like, we don't like these guys because we want to be friends with these guys.
I think
we want to be friends. We want to be friends as Calvinistic Baptists with the Presbyterians, but they don't like us. So
I think I saw that bit. Wasn't he talking to Jordan Cooper? And Cooper like takes it all the way down the chain. And he's like, Catholics want Eastern Orthodox to be their friends, and Eastern Orthodox just hate everybody.
Exactly.
That's true.
Yeah, that's exactly true. So I don't know. I'm trying to be friends with more Presbyterians, but maybe it's just not going to happen. They want to be friends with Lutherans. But I want to be friends with everybody. The Layman Apologist said, have friends in all camps. That's probably good.
That's good.
That's probably good.
Yeah.
While making your distinctions clear too. But
yes, yeah. And you don't, and that's the thing. It's like I'm not going to apologize for my convictions. I want to be firm in them, and I'll listen to the arguments of the other side. And that's good and healthy. But we can do that and without hating each other, without belittling each other or calling each other stupid or whatever. And in an online space, it's just so much easier to just pretend like there's not a living, breathing person on the other side of what you're saying. So
it may very well be just a robot at this point.
Yeah. There could be there's definitely bots for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's really sad too, because a lot of these, you know, we'll call them family disputes among Christians. It has a real apologetic impact. I mean, Seth and I have experienced this through even someone we've interviewed. One of our biggest interviews is a YouTuber, P.F. Young, and he's more of a cultural Christian. And one of his main things why he's like, well, why would I not be a cultural Christian? I'm just like one of those groups that you guys say are not Christian, but you know, the Catholics don't think you guys are Christians. And it's like, that's where those disputes, especially with how heated they get online, for someone that, you know, for all intents and purposes is not within orthodoxy, is that can be confusing. I totally see why you'd be like, yeah, well, why am I going to listen to you guys? You guys don't think that these people are right. So if we're not being clear,
we're going to hell.
Yeah, exactly. If we're not being clear that this is like, again, C.S. Lewis's mere Christianity, is this a mere Christianity issue?
Right.
Or Gavin Ortland's gospel triage. If we're not doing that well in our churches and especially in our online discourse, like like people walking in are going to be really confused.
Yes, yeah, for sure. And that's that's the thing, man. And maybe part of the reason why I think we get defensive as Baptists is you get so many of the accusations that are like, I've seen on X, I've seen everything from Baptists aren't Christians. I've seen Baptists are not much different than Mormons. Like I've seen so much garbage, and I'm just like, guys, like, is for all the work some of these guys do reading primary sources, read a dang Baptist one for once. Like, good grief, you know? And that's, I think that's what fuels some of my stuff. It's like, you know, if you're gonna come at it and say, here's what Baptists believe, and this is why you're not Christians, at least read a primary source from some, read a 17th century particular Baptist and see why they would say that's not so, and at least consider it. And, so I don't know. I understand the heated arguments that can happen, especially online. I honestly think it's one of the better parts of X is the whole spaces thing. So when people are actually talking with their, you're hearing someone's voice, where tone is a factor and all that. And don't get me wrong, I've heard some of those that I was like, yeesh, everyone's
I gotta get out of here.
yeah. But I've also heard some really fruitful things come from those, where it's like, okay, we can get along, we don't have to insult one another all the time. So yeah, dude, I totally get it.
And specifically, I mean, I've seen, and this is talking broadly and generalization. So this is my my preliminary concession before I get into what I'm about to say. I've seen the most ire and the most the most anti-Baptist rhetoric, let's just say, from former Baptists, people that convert from that tradition. And there's some level of, that's not always the case, but that's some level why I think someone like Bob the Baptist is so helpful. Like that moniker, Stay Baptist, is really helpful. Yeah. Not because you don't want to consider other traditions, but just like there is something to be said about growing into your own theology and the tradition that you were raised with. And not to say that there are not genuine converts to going Presbyterian or wherever they go.
Yeah.
But it in my mind, it's a red flag to be raised in a theological tradition and immediately turn. And it's like you got cannons directed at what you were, not too long ago. It seems like either you are not recognizing the things you're unified on in the current tradition you're in, or you didn't understand as much as you thought you did from the previous tradition you left. Now, that's broad generalizations. Again, there are people that convert genuinely that are well thought out and have done a lot of sincere work and just come to different opinions than me. That's totally fine.
And I know some of them, and I'm thankful for those brothers who they were genuinely convinced. And you're not going to hear berating from me about that. What I have a problem with, and I think what a lot of folks have a problem with in this kind of discussion, whether you're talking Baptist or whatever, there's believe it or not, this does happen in other traditions. So like the immediate turnaround and cannon fire that you talked about, that to me is just, I don't know. Fine, state your reasoning, right? But do it with charity. It's not that hard, honestly. I even look at, and I can look back and I understand why it doesn't happen sometimes. When I was leaving dispensationalism, and this was a long time ago now, I was very passionate about it, and probably to a degree that was not healthy. And I think part of it was just, I was so convinced, I'm like, I don't see this in the Bible, and you guys have been saying this all my life. And it's just, and so my reaction at first was not charitable. It was the cannon fire back. It was like, I was the guy who would start a conversation just by saying the rapture's not a thing. And, it exploded. And, and I don't get me wrong, I would still say that, but I would probably be more wise in how I would approach that kind of conversation.
Well, I think because there's something in the back of your mind that tells you, like, once you leave a tradition, you're like, and you come to this new truth that you've discovered, you're like, I feel lied to. Yes. So I think people just take that and they run with it. They're like, these people were lying to me. They were hiding this great truth that I've now discovered, and I need to get them out of their false beliefs. So the dispensational thing is true, because I feel that with myself too. I need to check my heart in that as well, because that, for sure, once you get out of that, there is a level of like pride, but not even that. It is like a, man, maybe it's evangelistic, maybe what we're talking about, zeal.
Yeah.
You're just like, I got to get these other people out of here.
Yep.
So yeah, that's important to remember as well.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm also just hesitant, and I don't like the current trend. And maybe it's not. Maybe this has always been the case, but from what I've seen from my time online and now getting an X, that you see a lot of. I think Redeemed Zoomer has coined it like denominational hookup culture, where you're just going from one to the next to the next to the next.
That's pretty good.
Yep. Yeah, that's a pretty accurate to what
that's
we're
pretty
seeing.
Good, yeah.
How do you, and maybe this doesn't apply to your direct church ministry, Colton, or maybe it does, but have you seen that? And how would you pastorally guide like a young man who's experiencing these types of pulls to like switch traditions?
Yeah, a different tradition. Yeah. Well, the first thing I would say, it depends on which tradition. Like let's acknowledge that there are genuine heretical traditions out there. So if you have someone switching to saying they're going to become a Jehovah's Witness,
right,
it's going to be handled a little more harshly. But if you have someone who is bringing that up to you in pastoral ministry, and there's a member of your congregation who's sharing where they're at, that's a perfect time for some shepherding to just say, hey, look, I hear you. I would like to get together with you over the next however many weeks, maybe once a night or once a week, where we can look at your concerns together and talk about them, and let me bring to you some of the richness of our tradition to the discussion and get your thoughts, and let's talk about it. And at the end of the day, I would just tell you what I would do. If let's say I had a young man in my church who is convinced that I'll do to me what I think is the easiest one from a church that's more confessional but Baptist. And let's say they're moving to a Presbyterian tradition, and they're not wanting to move to a super like woke one, like they're wanting to move to like the PCA or something more conservative. And we spend that time together, and they're still not convinced, and they're like, no, this is just where I'm at. Man, I would send them out with my blessing. Because I would rather them not, if they cannot submit to the teaching of our church, but they're still within the realm of orthodoxy, we definitely disagree, and they can't submit to the elders of our church, but they're still, by other accounts, a faithful Christian. They're not a cantankerous sort on purpose, or they're not just trying to be a jerk. They're just like, I'm genuinely convicted. I don't have a problem saying, okay, you've come to a different place, and I've done my work. I've walked with you and explained, we've done, then go, I'll help you find a solid PCA church, brother. Like, let me help you. Let's walk through this. I would rather do that than just cast them out on their own, just like, go figure it out. It's like, no. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And then sometimes, believe it or not, it happens. I have a member in my church. He is a member. He has Paedo-Baptist convictions, but he is a member at my church. And when we talked through his membership and, we gathered together, he agreed that he would not teach against the teachings of the church. He would, he would submit to the elders. We are the only church within this huge radius that has conservative confessional convictions. And so to him, it's like, yeah, I would go to the PCA church if there was one close by, but there's not. There's just not. So he's like, I love the Bible teaching here. I disagree with this point of doctrine, but I will not be cantankerous. I will submit to the teaching of the elders. This brother was baptized by immersion, even though he has different convictions, so it was just an easy, like, yeah, brother, you can be a member of our church, right? Like it's so part of that, man, just it comes down to having hard pastoral conversations, and you got to do it, and that's the way you progress in a healthy way, and I think it's a good thing. I would hate to see someone go and change their convictions, but if we've done our due diligence, it would hurt. It would be like, man, I would love to have you here, but I still think you're a brother in Christ. I want to help you in that process in any way I can. So that's my approach to it. And I'm sure someone out there online would say that I'm soft for that, but that's the way I think.
I think it sounds great.
The woke mind vibers.
Yeah.
It's actually a great transition to my next question, which is still pastoral and still kind of guiding our present moment. I've been having conversations with actually my local pastors about this, and and I'll bring it to you because I think it's relevant, especially with recent current events. There was a lot of discussion about, if your pastor doesn't preach on this or this, you should leave, stuff like that. And not to dig into that as much because, I'm sure there's healthy disagreement there as well. But that whole idea of pastoring in 2025 is that a lot of your members or lay people are essentially being pastored on the internet. They have immediate access to theological resources. They have immediate access to any type of sermon that will tell them exactly what they want to hear. And for the most part, expositionally, like expository sermons about whatever subject they want to hear. And so how are you navigating that in our present time where, you and your local church authority, do you feel like that is a challenge in the current day and age to be like, hey, this is where our church stands, and you're a member of this church, which means by definition you're submitting to where we stand, not just where you're getting this theology from online.
Yeah, for sure, man. It is a thing, and it's got to be talked about. I think those conversations have to begin with that reality of like, let's get one thing out of the way first. Do you think that you can be effectively shepherded online? Because if you do, that's the first, like, we got to stop there. Okay. And I know that, there's video chats and stuff like that, but most people who are going to be doing this are watching guys on YouTube or whatever. And you may find yourself attracted to a teaching or whatever, but pastoral ministry is more than just preaching and teaching. It's it's a walking with. And if you can concede that, if you can say, okay, that's true, then it's like, okay, are you willing to listen to your local church pastors where you're currently a member? Are you willing to go to them and speak to them about these things and talk and let them shepherd you through it? Because you can't, on an online guy who's preaching, sermons, and you see him online, nothing wrong with posting your sermons online. It's I listen to sermons. I'm sure you guys do too. It's a good thing. I think it's good to have teaching that's out there. But what is the primary way God has ordained that his people would be sanctified, right? Built up, equipped? Is it YouTube? No. It's the local church, right? It's your church. And if you have major problems with your own local church, then you might need to find a new church. But at least, do the courtesy of talking to your pastors about that and go through that process. And I think from a pastor's perspective, unfortunately, we have to be more aware of all the things that are being said online. Like you've got to know. Now, I know that we're limited in our capacity. I don't have time to watch every sermon from every joker that someone's going to online. But you got to be aware of the main things they're saying, and that's where I think pastoral ministry in an internet age has taken on another responsibility there. Where if you have a member who's saying, "Hey, I learned this from this guy on the internet," that's got to light your eyes up a little bit, and you got to go, I need to check out who this guy is that one of my sheep is learning from. And so you got to be prepared to do some research and press that conversation. So, yeah.
It's kind of like Paul taking on like Greek philosophy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to be aware of it, man. And Paul talks about that and warning against false teaching and stuff like that. I feel like it was really easy for us when it was just the prosperity gospel. Right? Like
that's a good quote.
It was such an easy target. It's like, this is clearly not the gospel. And, everyone was made aware of the prosperity gospel. Every well-known online pastor who was solid-ish at best was going after the prosperity gospel, saying that this is not the gospel. But we've come a long way from there, So, yeah.
And how do you, you mentioned this in your previous example, but it's something that's been a concern of mine too, thinking about pastoral ministry. How do you navigate just someone being like, okay, thanks, Colton, for that advice. I'm leaving. I'm looking for another church. That's great. I'm a member here. I submit to your authority, but I could always just go to another church. How do you navigate that with someone that you're counseling?
Yeah, that's where it gets a little muddier, a little harder. So I think if you have someone who's a member at your church, but they're not ever coming to it, they're going somewhere else. This is a conversation you've got to have of, if that's where you want to go, let's talk about the process of you moving there. Because that would, if we believe in meaningful membership, which especially for Baptists is pretty important, congregational polity brings with it a meaningful, very meaningful membership. And that's not to say other forms of government don't. I'm just saying, especially among Baptists, that's why so many churches in the SBC are a mess, is because they don't care about it anymore.
Yep.
So if you take membership meaningfully, you got to have those conversations. And if they say, well, I just want to be a member here, but go there, to be able to say lovingly, no, like I'm not okay with that. Like that doesn't make sense. You either want to be here or be there. And, if it's a church, this could play out in so many different scenarios. If it's another solid church that's like-minded, for me, if they keep doing that's a call to the pastor there. For me, it's like, hey, brother, I've got a member. He's visiting your church. I've encouraged him to maybe consider moving there because he likes it there better. But he's refusing that process. At that point, that's where you've got to get a little more messy. But especially if you have a church discipline situation where, like they've been warned and they're not listening to the advice of the elders, and especially if there's sin involved. Man, I have no problem calling another pastor that a member might be going to their church and they're in unrepentant sin under church discipline here, and calling him and saying, hey, here's the situation, And at the end of the day, I think, and I've promoted it a lot, but Jonathan Lehman's book on authority is so helpful. And he talks about pastors having the authority of counsel. So we don't have the authority to make someone not do that. Like they're still a free agent, they can do that. But the church does have the authority if it gets to that point, to where you practice discipline. So, man, I guess it's a loaded question, because it depends on the situation, right? It could go so many ways.
Yeah, they're a little bit context dependent for sure.
Yeah.
I'm with layman apologists. Letters of recommendation need to become important again. I mean, in my time in church, I've never.
Yeah,
I had that for college.
I mean, a level of like, they'll, if you're being considered for church, service, they might call your recommendations or whatever you put on your resume. But certainly members transitioning, like calling their former church, that's even not even a well-practiced thing.
Yeah. And it's so basic, and it should happen. I mean, that's whenever we intake new members, we ask where they've been to church previously. And if they're not new believers, and we'll follow up, we're going to figure that stuff out. So you got to care about it, man. You got to care about membership.
That is,
and I feel like it's not just in relation to Baptists. It's probably a very American ideal that is very hesitant for church authority, especially in the matters of church discipline. But like this is crazy to say, but like I want to be the type of member and Christian that says, if I fall out of line, I want my church to discipline me, even to the point of excommunication. Like that's something that they should actually consider. I have never seen that in Baptist churches in my life. I would probably have to search online to find a Baptist church that's excommunicated anybody. I don't even know what the situation is for that. And you don't want to liberally do that. You want to be discerning and wise, and you don't want to be domineering with church authority. But at the same time, I feel like we've taken our freedoms with like talking about the Baptist tradition, the separation of church and state. We have this beautiful liberty for the church and the individual lives of believers, but we're not using it. Like they're not exercising it.
And not only that, but also, part of confessional Baptist life is associationalism, right? It's having other churches that you're connected to, when there's a really, really difficult case where you can even lean on those brothers. And that's not popular anymore, because Baptist associations nowadays are just social clubs, where people get together and share how many baptisms they've had, and then everybody pats each other on the back and you go home. But it's like, no, it didn't used to be that way. And that's why a strong associationalism can be very helpful in times like that. But with regard to discipline and excommunication, I have actually seen it in a Baptist church, believe it or not, with an unrepentant person that, I mean, and it didn't come lightly. I mean, it was years of walking and trying, and eventually just got to say, no, we have warned and warned and warned, and you are not listening. And therefore the church has the keys, and we bring it to the church and tell the truth. And that kind of stuff, man, it's not popular, but we need it. We have to have it. And of course, the hope of church discipline is that we won't get to that point, right? Like that's the hope. But I would say the problem is not so much that churches aren't doing excommunication, rather than they're not doing the other steps leading up to it. There's just it's like, well, they didn't like us, so they left. And there's no follow-up, there's no discussion, and it's just like, well, okay, and there's just nothing. And that's something that's hard when you have, it's common in a culture where it's just not practiced, and you got to bring it in gently and explain, hey, when we gather together, we view this thing that we're doing as members of Christ's body as a covenant, right? We have covenant membership. We believe that we're holding one another accountable, and it's just lost now.
Yeah.
Bring it back.
Yeah, true. Bring it back.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna be making eventually. I need to figure out when I can actually film this, but I want to make a video on like American individualism, because I feel like that's kind of what we're getting around. It seems like it's like a downstream effect from culture that's like infected the church, where it's no longer, rather like the church is almost like afraid to stand out now.
Yeah,
I think in terms of culturally or even socially.
And it's like, it's just not like, it's a misunderstanding of like church discipline can be a means of God's sanctification.
Correct.
Yep.
People don't even view it like that. They just think,
it's just mean.
Yeah,
it's just mean. Yeah. But then it's like, but then we always act so shocked when we hear of people like Ravi Zacharias.
Right. Yeah.
And those huge blowups. And then it's on the church for not having the discipline.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's the thing. Like in the culture nowadays, even among Christian culture, it's unthinkable to some people that a church would excommunicate a person.
Yeah.
Like it's just like unthinkable, and they look at it as mean or wrong. But we see church discipline in the New Testament work effectively from 1 Corinthians to 2 Corinthians. Like you see it, right? I mean, Paul tells them, break fellowship with this dude. Like you've got to purge the evil from your midst. And then we get to 2 Corinthians, and what does he say? Bring him back in. He's repented. It's always been about restoration and actually having accountability among the body. And that's something I'm trying to instill in our church, because it's just not common anymore, is genuine confession of sin to your brothers and sisters. Like admit your sin. And the thing is like, if you don't start doing it, even with the small things, and I say small, but y'all, sin is heavy to God, but like, let's say you lose it and you blow up at your wife and kids in anger, and you don't confess that to other brothers and sisters to be praying for you and walking with you through that, you're certainly not going to confess porn use. Right. Because you're not going to, like, you've got to make a practice of, whenever you have a blow up or you sin, let's say you, even something small, like you told, I say small again, I want to qualify, but you tell a lie to someone one week, and it was just kind of what happened, and you're just like, and you just embellished a story or whatever. To be tender enough and ready to confess that, and not just in your own private prayers, but to go to a trusted brother and say, man, I sinned this week in this way, and it hit me, and I realized it. And part of that is just the sanctification process of being tender to it, like sin bothers you. And that, I think that's how we end up with these horrible situations where you have a big major thing that happens later, because the person, like, there was no culture in the church for confession of sin. Just didn't happen.
Yeah, and then that like makes me like, I'm like, the Catholics got something right. like it's at least somewhat. It's so institutional, but it's dogmatic in a way that we wouldn't agree with. But at least they have this culture of confession. And it's like we've gotten so far away from that. It's like, like you said, it's foreign to us.
Right.
Yeah, and especially in Baptist circles, we just have to be better. That's really the
right. Well, and you think about it in terms of the biblical parameters that are set. The Bible doesn't teach New Testament confession to a priest, right? It doesn't. It says that we are to confess our sins to one another. And in order to have that sort of culture in your church, it has to be a healthy church, to where that thing happens, right? Where it's expected. We have a way I've tried to implement this at our church. We have a men's group that meets once a month on Saturdays, And I've started it with every time we meet, before we get into the word, we go around the table and we share a victory or something that has just gone right, and we're thankful. We want to, praise God for it. Share prayer requests for things that may not be going so well. And then also confess our sin to like in that room with those brothers to confess sin. And we've had some very, very honest, good, open confessions of sin that we've been able to pray for one another about. And I think it starts with, you just got to do, as a pastor, you have to do something that implements that to where it's an expected part of the culture of your church. We confess our sins, not because, and the problem I know can come whenever you have a person who comes into that and they just start spreading dirt and, raking you over the coals and telling everybody what you did when they shouldn't. And I get that. And I'm not saying all sin. Like if you have a very serious thing to confess, that's like a trusted brother or your pastor or someone. I totally get that. But just to have something in the culture of your church where we're doing this thing the Bible tells us we ought to do in confessing our sins, I think that's so vitally important. And I've not done that right in my ministry before, and I'm trying to rectify it now. Yeah.
That's an awesome testimony. Yeah, it's true and strong, and it's man, and for men, it's so important. It's so huge to be in that culture of consistent and layman apologist in comments said as well, to be wise how you confess and who you confess to as well. I think a lot of trust goes into your pastors, but there's you can
for sure.
that can certainly be abused in certain circumstances or circles as well.
Right. And that's why I kind of added that caveat.
Right.
You do have to practice wisdom, and I'm not saying that you should air all of your dirty laundry out to a huge group. Our group, we do that and make a practice of it, but I also, there are certain things that I get that you've got to go to that person that's trusted that is not gonna gossip about it or what. I totally get what he's saying, and I agree with him. You have to be wise, but that I also, the only thing I would say to that is we don't want to do it to be so cautious that we don't do it. Like it needs to be done. And but I totally agree with what he's saying.
Well, I will say that's the final word. Thank you for coming on, Colton, and chatting with us and sharing a moment just to discuss. Really, we covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, we did. That was really
history
good.
and ministry, and past some of your pastoral wisdom, and then also talked about Baptist theology and some of our frustrations online. Staying Baptist as well.
Yeah, man. I appreciate it, guys. And I'm just another dude, man. I'm just a small town pastor. So I don't know how much wisdom was in any of this, but I do appreciate it, and thankful to the Lord for what he's doing. And thank you guys. And I really enjoyed the conversation, being able to talk about this stuff. We need pastoral ministry needs to be something that we talk about and learn from one another on. And I'm so thankful for all the guys who've walked with me through it. So if anything I was able to pass on that was helpful, I'm thankful. So that's cool.
Yeah. Praise God. Well, subscribe to Colton and follow him on Twitter. We will not be calling it X. Join his Kiwi emoji cult, which you haven't said what it's meant yet, right? It's a secret.
It's a total mystery. The crossed the crossed swords do have a meaning. I don't disclose it, but there's a hint in my bio about it. But the Kiwi is something that is a close guarded secret in my mind, and I've assigned a meaning to it, but I haven't told a soul. And I really just did it because I wanted to see how many people would put it in their bio as well, just to see what would happen.
Invent their own meanings for it. That's so fun. So yeah, if you want to do that, if you want to join the Kiwi cult, definitely do it.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
Or don't. I don't care, honestly.
yeah, or don't. Well, yeah, fill in your own meaning to it. Yeah, I'll just say subscribe to the Obro Show. On the road to 250 subscribers. Hopefully we get there by the new year. Otherwise, we're just going to have more fun conversations as we're navigating the interwebs and the world and meeting cool people through it. So join the crew.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we'll see you all next time. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks, guys.